Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another legislative link up. I will let our guest introduce himself and we will start talking about different occupational licensing legislation here in the Commonwealth. My name is Alana Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Relations for the NE Center for the Study of Occupational Regulation, and I'll turn it over to our guest.
Good morning and thank you. I'm Representative Curt Sonney. I represent the 4th Legislative District, which is Eastern Erie County. So I'm bordered by Lake Erie and the New York state line.
Great. So do you go into the city often? I know it's not necessarily city, but how do you feel? Do you go in there often or no?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm 10 miles from the center of Erie, from Center City. So I'm close. I'm suburbs, but I'm close.
Yeah, they have a really nice wine fest I've been to quite a few times up there. My aunt actually lives in Erie, so when we go to visit her, that's usually on her list of things to do. So
great. Then you come and see the snow.
Exactly. So we'll get right into it. Tell us a little bit about your House Bill 2830.
Well, obviously that was in some sense a COVID bill. My wife and my daughter are both registered nurses, so I often hear of the challenges and the difficulties of staffing, in the areas where they work. And so I've always been well aware of those types of issues and the challenges that our healthcare professionals, face day to day. When it comes to staffing, that absolutely has gotten to be a greater challenge as time has gone on. We all know that there's more people leaving the workforce than entering the workforce, and so these shortages are going to continue for a while. So we have to do what we can legislatively to try and address those issues when that that real extra need surfaces to the top that really shows that you have to do something. You have to do something. It shouldn't be so much that our backs are against the wall, but we deal with needs of every aspect of this Commonwealth. And so that need really has to percolate to the top to get that legislative priority to get those types of bills moving. So, obviously, nurses' aides are critically important to healthcare delivery. So the House bill was, designed to eliminate the challenges because of COVID and allow those that were practicing to be able to continue to practice.
So do you think that this has any sort of staying power or converting power into something a little more permanent?
I think time will tell on that. I think that you're going to see everybody take a new look at the delivery of healthcare. I think that COVID hopefully has shown of some good to come from COVID, hopefully, would be that it has shown that, we can be successful in choosing different avenues and different paths, to get that educational requirement that we're all looking for.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the important things here, and something that seems so simple, but also doesn't happen until a crisis like COVID happens. And then you kind of see, hey, there are alternative paths. There are different ways to still make sure that the health and safety of the consumer is still top priority, but also without restricting access to that specific occupation, especially an occupation like nursing that I know healthcare in Pennsylvania in general is a huge organization and a huge industry, I should say. Mm-hmm. And now more than ever, I know I have a lot of friends who are nurses and doctors and, healthcare administrators and whatnot. And, there really is a shortage happening right now in the Commonwealth, especially with a global pandemic happening. So I think that that's one of the things that is so important about your House bill is that um, it's something that's really, really necessary, but also while maintaining, like I said, the health and safety of the patient in this case. And I think that that's something that would have only came about, unfortunately, with a pandemic like this. So at least there is some silver lining in it.
Well, and the general public is being, trained, to use telemedicine now. Most of your family physicians, would prefer to do telemedicine if possible. So they're going to show that, it does work. I think that people will learn to be comfortable with it. And if people are comfortable with it, they'll be comfortable with people using that as a pathway also. So, that's one of the hopeful good changes to come because of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you had brought that up, and I kind of want to dive into that a little bit more into telemedicine and then how that works and everything. I first want to ask, how did you first find out about it, and what's your understanding of it?
Well, obviously we've dealt with telemedicine in the past in the legislature. The last greatest push, I guess, was when Representative Mustio made a very strong attempt to try to get it across the line. It was unsuccessful. And of course, the insurance companies would say that they're fine with telemedicine as long as you're talking to their doctors, not your own. And that's an issue. That is an issue. But now, ironically, it is our everyday doctors that are, kind of requesting the telemedicine. And so things have changed. And obviously insurance is paying for that. So, it'll be a different picture as we, look to keep advancing these types of issues as we move forward.
Absolutely. And just to dive into like the occupational licensing space a little bit more, um, a lot of people think that like the right to earn a living is sort of a baseline for occupational licensing and economic mobility and economic freedom, quite frankly. Where do you stand on occupational licensing, and what do you think is like the minimum standard for, license holders in the Commonwealth?
Well, that's kind of too broad based. Because everybody that's licensed right now has standards. They all have scope of practice. Most of our issues seem to center around more on scope of practice. Everybody's fighting to either cement their niche or steal a little bit of somebody else's. And that's just how that whole entire profession seems to work. All of those licensees, for the most part. But now, because of COVID, when we look at ways that we have changed or adapted or waivers that were granted or whatever they were, it brings a different conversation now to the table. And hopefully a welcome conversation. So we can really attempt to see if we can move forward on these other types of issues again and move more away from scope of practice.
Right. And just going off of that, so, and kind of wrapping up the occupational license specific talk, are there any pieces of legislation currently coming up, I should say, because we know we're kind of winding down here. You're kind of already winding down, but are there any pieces of legislation coming up with occupational licensing that you think would be really good for the Commonwealth?
Well, that's yet to be seen. Like you said, we not only are winding down, we're done. So that the slate has been wiped clean. Bills are just now starting to be reintroduced, and they'll continue to be reintroduced pretty heartedly, over the course of the next month or so. And so, without having, actually seen and read that many bills being reintroduced or newly introduced, it's hard to speak on that specific topic, but I can assure you there'll be a number of them.
I'm sure. I've talked to quite a few legislators within the Commonwealth over the last few months about occupational licensing legislation, starting with Act 41, as we all know very well, and kind of having break-off bills almost from that and just sort of enhancing on that, which I will say, I know I keep saying this every legislative link up, but like such strong kudos to our General Assembly in passing Act 41, being, one of the historical and monumental states to pass that sort of legislation. I mean, it was a huge surprise coming from the desk of Governor Wolf, specifically in the occupational licensing community. So that was a nice General Assembly push, and I'm always sure to make sure that the occupational licensing researchers know that that was our General Assembly, that was our House and Senate. And I think that's really important. And so again, kudos to that. And every legislator I get to talk to, I always say that to them, because it is something more monumental than you may even imagine or realize, because it pushes other states too to then start reforming their occupational licensing codes and things like that. So I definitely appreciate it.
Good, and it's going to continue to be an ongoing process.
I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. Every time I speak, like I said, to a different legislator, you guys are all kind of all in the same boat, whether you're Republican, Democrat, House, Senate, you're all kind of in agreement that, occupational licensing reform within the Commonwealth needs to take place, but in a safe and reasonable manner. So I think that's really important. And I don't know if you want to speak on that anymore or not, but I think that's something that's, goes further than other states do.
Well, it's always good to be a leader in something, right?
Absolutely.
So, for a legislator, that's just simply another part of your working day, because the issues are vast that we all deal with. But it's always really nice to know when you pass something that has a little bit more of a, you might say, an extraordinary meeting. And so it always does feel good to know that, legislation has moved forward that really and truly makes an impactful difference today and tomorrow and the day after and for many days to come.
Absolutely. And on that note, I will wrap up our interview here, or conversation rather. And I'll turn it over to you. How can your constituents or occupational licensing researchers reach you or help follow bills or see what's going on in your district? What's the best way for them to kind of keep an eye on things that are happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, you can reach out to me by email at csonney@pahousegop.com. And that's really, you can get on my mailing list if you wish. And I try to keep that a weekly email very informative to all of my constituents. And, I don't want it to be, look what I'm doing. I want it to be, look what we are doing in Harrisburg. And so I really try to focus on that and to keep everybody as informed as I can, especially on bills that are being talked about or that are moving through the process.
That's great. So if any occupational licensing researchers or constituents in Representative Sonney's district are interested in seeing what's going on, not just in the district and not just with the representative, but in the Commonwealth in general and what's going on in and out of Harrisburg, you can sign up for his newsletter. Any social media sites at all?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page. I don't really do much with that. I'm not a social media person, so
That's
is about
okay.
as far as I go right here.
That's quite all right. Then I feel even more honored that we are live streaming you on Facebook right now. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today on our legislative link up. Now on our website, www.csorsfu.com. Right in the first banner that you'll see, you can click to get alerts on future legislative link ups, to see any additional recordings of past legislative link ups, as well as suggest a legislator and or a specific piece of legislation or a bill that you would like to see on our next legislative link up. Thank you all so much again. Thank you, Representative, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And excited to see what's going to happen next in the Pennsylvania legislature in the next session next year. So hopefully more reforms.
Hopefully. Thanks so much.
Thank you.